Hey everyone, it's Jen,
And this is Lindsay.
and welcome to Corpus Delicti, the podcast. This is a special Patreon episode, and you're going to hear the behind the scenes when we get to talk to our Patreons, interact, and we get to cover a story.
And the reason we are saying it this way is we decided we have, obviously, with holidays coming up, instead of us skipping when we're off, what we want to do is take some of the Patreon episodes, but not the full thing, and release them. We're going to take the story part because these are missing persons cases and we feel like they should be out there. So we're going to take the actual cases and release them when we are technically off. But then the part that we do with Patreon after the episode where we hang out and chat and all that, that is going to remain exclusive for Patreon. So we will have, Thanksgiving, Christmas time coming up. If this is your first time joining us for whatever reason, this is not the normal format of our episodes. Patreon tends to be a little more casual, less edited.
No
We'll edit
edited.
it a little bit, if we actually release it, but it's not our normal thing. So if you're brand new, this is not the best one to make a judgment call on, let's put it that way. So we are actually on Zoom right now with some of our amazing Patreon supporters, and we are going to go ahead and kick off this story.
This story unfortunately highlights differences in how certain cases get handled in the media and by local law enforcement. This story is about Stacy A. Pennant. Now, she's born in 1973 on April 30th and was raised in Jamaica. Her and her mother moved to New York City in 1992, where they went to live in Queens.
So she was a business student at Queensborough Community College. She was a really, really good student. She made excellent grades, and she worked nights as a cargo agent for Delta Airlines at the Kennedy International Airport. She went to the movies on February 9th, 1995 at Green Acres Mall in Valley Stream. She went with a male friend who was also a coworker. He was also a Jamaican native. And she was last seen dropping this friend companion off on East 85th Street between Avenue M and Avenue N in Canarsie, Brooklyn at 11:30 p.m. She dropped him off, and she was driving her blue 1990 Honda Civic Del Sol. It had New York license plate number E478RT at the time. She had actually just bought this car a few months earlier. One important note, apparently the Del Sol model was not released until 1992. So it's possible that they may have gotten the date of the car wrong, the year. They could have gotten the model wrong, but most people seem pretty certain that it was a Del Sol. And she did have stuffed animals in the back window. So just a little piece there that people can think of, just to trigger a memory. Did anyone see something?
The friend she was with the night she disappeared said she had recently broken up with her boyfriend, but she didn't seem particularly distraught over it. She was in a great mood and she was enjoying the evening. She was laughing and she didn't really have a worry in the world. Now, he stated that he gave Stacy directions back to her home via the Beltway and she drove off. She was described as being an individual who didn't have a drug or alcohol problem. She was pretty much on the straight and narrow. There wasn't really any issues in her life that would cause her to decide just to get up and leave. She was actually on the dean's list the last semester that she was attending the community college, and they didn't believe that with all the stickiness that we call it in her community, she's going to school, she has a job, she has friends, that she wouldn't just run away. And in fact, this is a girl that really didn't go out that often, and it was something of a rarity that for her to go out because of her work and school schedule. She'd get home from her graveyard shift, and then her graveyard shift was about 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So she worked all night, slept just for a few hours, got up and went to school. And the same night, she told the friend that she was going to go home and finish her homework. She was going to call him when she actually arrived to her house, but she never called.
So Stacy's aunt works as a psychic, and when she did not come home that night, her aunt reported that she saw her niece somewhere around the airport where Stacy worked. And this is actually interesting as we go. We're not debating psychics, but we are saying that this theory does come up later. So everyone went actively looking for her. And when we say everyone, we mean everyone in her family because no one else really was. Her mom called police. They were like, give it some time. The same thing that we see in so many cases. So the mom, the aunt, other family members go out looking for her. And heartbreakingly, they actually did find a body, but it was the body of a man. So this whole thing is just completely traumatizing for them. And those who knew Stacy said she's very, very focused. She has her priorities straight. She's very determined to finish school. She didn't drink or smoke. She had a very healthy diet. She ate a lot of fruits and vegetables throughout the course of her busy days. And another coworker said, if you had a daughter, you'd want her to be just like Stacy. And there's not a whole lot of information here. So her case remains unsolved and the car has never been found. And we're going to get into some of the theories as to what happened, but allegedly the ex-boyfriend and the coworker who she was with that night were both cleared as suspects. We do not know what cleared them. We don't know what the alibi was. None of that is public. But for the longest time, her mother left her room exactly the same, hopeful that she would come home. She left the bedroom door open. She left her stuffed animals on the bed because when Stacy came home, she wanted it to be just home. She wanted to forget the whole thing. So even though there's limited information, there are several theories out there about what could have happened.
One of the theories is that on March 1995, the bodies of two women were found in Brooklyn. They were both young females who had been doused with gasoline and they were set on fire. First, they identified one as Kimberly Antonakos, who lived in Canarsie and had last been seen around 3 a.m. on March 1st, dropping off a friend, and that was at the corner of 93rd and Coughlin. She was found in the basement of a vacant home. And unfortunately, this part is a little gruesome, so skip ahead 15 seconds if you don't want to hear it. She had been tied to a chair and burned. So, I mean, you're thinking horrific torture here. They do think Kimberly made it back to her house on 87th Street near Avenue N because her father found a single earring of hers in the street in front of her house. So what they're thinking here is that someone nabbed her just about the time she was going to walk into her front door.
So the reason this is relevant is Kimberly's apartment was very, very near where Stacy was last seen. So remember, Stacy had dropped her friend off at 85th and Kimberly lived on 87th. So this is just 2 blocks away. This is not far at all. So the story, some of the backstory on Kimberly is she had apparently gone out with a man that she recently met. This man was laying it on thick. He told her that she was perfect for him. And the very next day, he tried to propose to her and give her an engagement ring. So Kimberly's car was recovered on Long Island about a week later. A witness reported seeing that the car had been parked there for a few hours after Kimberly was last seen. And another witness said that they saw a man come back to the car and wipe the vehicle down. And all these people thought this was weird because it is, right? So they called police and they said, look, this is suspicious. Somebody's cleaning up here. But it took a week for officers to respond to those calls. It was almost one of those things where once they started getting more and more calls about it, they were like, okay, fine, I guess we'll go look. So during that time, before they got out there, locals were looking inside the car. They would come up and start snooping. And one of them noticed a piece of paper with directions scribbled on it. And another witness said she saw a woman's hairbrush on the seat. So this is horrible for preserving evidence. They're just leaving it out there. Even if people weren't coming and going and putting their hands all over it and all that, it's sitting out there in the elements for all this time. And it's just getting all deteriorated.
Now, Joshua Torres, he was 23 years old at the time, was arrested and convicted for Kimberly's murder. The argument here was that Torres, along with two other people, intended to kidnap her for a ransom so that Torres could buy a new car once they found out that her father had a lot of money. Torres was temporarily staying with Kim while he was waiting for his apartment to be completed and had known Kim for several years, which would make it unlikely that he was the one that she had just met and he was the one that was trying to propose. Now, Torres continues to maintain his innocence. A second body was found in Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn in a charred suitcase behind PS 183. The woman had been strangled, stuffed into a plastic bag, and then into a suitcase. This suitcase was set on fire after being doused with gasoline. At first, it sounded like this could possibly be Stacy. It's a Black female or a woman of color, around the same height, around the same weight. But after the x-ray, they determined it couldn't be her because they looked at the foot and they were able to tell just from that.
So I think it sounded like what they were hinting at in some of the sources, and they didn't flat out say it, is that there might have been a break in one foot and not the other, and not an active break, but you know how if you've had a broken bone in an x-ray, you can tell that it's been broken before. It didn't match up, and that's how they were able to determine that. So police initially looked into the possibility that Kimberly's death and this Jane Doe were connected to Stacy's disappearance, like Jen said, but they couldn't reach a determination. So even when they determined that it wasn't Stacy, they were like, could it be related? Could this essentially be a serial killer? That wasn't Stacy, but did this same thing happen to Stacy? But again, they couldn't reach a determination. But the reason they were really intrigued by this, and in a way still are, because we know that this is not solved. So for one, Stacy and Kimberly both drove Hondas. Now, to be fair, a lot of people do. It's a very popular car. Another thing that intrigued them about the connection between these cases is that Stacy and Kimberly both went missing at night, relatively late, after dropping friends off 2 blocks from each other. Stacy, we know that hers was around 11:30, and Kimberly, she disappeared. It was much later. It was about 3:30 in the morning, but still, it was late at night. They had both been out dropping people off. Both of them were college students, and they were very close in age as well. Kimberly was 20 and Stacy was 21. But even though there were some similarities, there were some differences as well, which is why it was hard to make a connection. So for one, and this is the biggest one, Kimberly's car was found. So Kimberly was murdered after Stacy went missing. So would the same person have murdered Stacy, disposed of her car, just to do the same thing 1 month later, but leave the car out? Maybe, maybe not. People do change up their routine, but if you knew how to properly dispose of a car and no one had found it for a month, why would you then leave one out in the open? Maybe it was too much work to hide it. It's possible, but this is why they had trouble making that determination.
With all of these similarities, you would think that they would get a share of airtime on the local news. However, that is not the case. Even just to promote the fact that women are going missing in this small block radius, Kimberly was everywhere, but Stacy was not. Now, of course, this infuriated the family, and they even said they approached the news and radio stations and even the papers, but all of them said, you know what, this just isn't newsworthy. We're not going to get it out there to the public. And to be fair, Kimberly, she was found, albeit she was not alive anymore. And unfortunately, she was missing for several days before they found her deceased.
The argument they're saying, well, you know, we covered Kimberly because she was dead, but she was also just quote unquote missing for 5 days before she was found. And in that 5 days, she was still getting a ton of coverage. You know, she's missing, help us find her. But with Stacy, there was nothing, even when she was quote unquote just missing. And it just her family was like, why? But then all of a sudden, when Kimberly was found and they were starting to wonder if the cases were connected, then Stacy's name is getting brought up. And they're like, now she's an afterthought. The family just felt like now she's just an afterthought, which is really sad.
And now it may be too late. So within the first 24 to 40 hours is the real golden time for when someone goes missing. Now, there is another theory out there, and according to historical weather reports, the weather that night is about 20 degrees and it's windy. So very dark, very windy, and it's cold, which leads to the theory that she may have slipped on the road and gone into the water because she passed a bridge in water on her way home. Now, this theory is actually brought forth on Reddit, so give it its course of thought, but it does have a lot of good detail in it to make you really pause and think about it.
People on Reddit, when this poster put this forward, they were like, you need to call the police with this tip. And they encouraged the person because everyone was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that could be it. And said, so it did end up being a legitimate tip, even though it's on Reddit. So we'll go into that.
Now, the post is titled, I Have a Theory About Stacy Pennant, who went missing from Carnegie, Brooklyn in February 9th, 1995. And if you want to read through it, the author includes maps and a lot of information that are extremely helpful in this case and to really get down deep into the details. Now, it states that the route she would have taken goes down a very busy road, but there's a shortcut with almost no traffic that she could have taken. And it would have been a road that actually passed through the airport employee parking area, which she would have been familiar with since she worked at the airport. It would have led her out on a stretch of road alongside the water. This is a very private spot. There's no swimming or fishing or boating that's allowed in that water. The author of the Reddit post felt that it would have been easy for her just to have slid, gone off the road and into the water, and nobody else would have seen it. So she would have just been driving along, wind gust, she loses control, and she goes straight into the icy water.
Or even ice, if there was ice on the road. We don't know.
She might have slid off.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have hurt anyone to go out there and do a survey of the water just to see if there's tire tracks. But I don't think anyone ever did.
Well, so the Reddit post was posted less than a year ago. So it's one of those things that could technically be in process. When somebody submits a tip, it doesn't necessarily happen right away, especially if there's equipment involved or divers or whatever it may be. Do you have to get a permit to go somewhere? So maybe someone will end up doing that. But that area right there has gone through a series of road railing changes since then that are more sturdy, which begs the question, have there been a lot of accidents there? So this Reddit poster went in and pulled photographs, I guess probably from Google Earth or whatever, showing that stretch of road over the years. And it was really, really low at the time. I'm talking, I don't even know why it was there. It was very, very low. And now it's almost like a cement wall. And so you have to wonder, has there been a lot that's happened there to make them tighten that spot up? So the next theory, and this one, we're just going to put it out there, is the Long Island Ripper, aka the Long Island serial killer, aka Lisk, which a lot of us have heard of. And we're going to give a super, super high level overview of that case because this episode is about Stacy, but we do need a little bit of back info here. So 10 bodies are found in New York from December 2010 and into 2011, but 4 really captured their attention because they were very obviously related to the same killer. The 4 in December were found on Gilgo Beach along the parkway. They were found severely decomposed and wrapped in burlap cloth. Then more bodies were found months later. Might have been related, might not have been, but these 4 definitely were. And these 4 became known as the Gilgo 4. All 4 of them were sex workers and had advertised on Craigslist. They were all found within 500 feet of each other, and they had all been strangled. Now, pause on that for a second. Years before that, in 2006, 4 bodies were found murdered on the beach in Atlantic City, New Jersey. So investigators have this New York situation and they're like, something sounds familiar. They remember that this happened in 2006 in New Jersey. So they start looking into it and they make the connection that one of the Atlantic City victims used to live in New York. And this was Kim Raffo.
Kim's husband had a place in New York, and you've kind of guessed it, right around the same time when Stacy and Kimberly had both gone missing. Now it's a stretch. There's really nothing else out there that really links them. But, I mean, to be fair, serial killers don't stay on the same block. They don't usually hunt, if you want to use that word, on the same street. They do travel just like you and I, and they have been known to cross state lines.
And they move, they get relocated because they have jobs. And the place where the place that he had in New York was, again, within blocks of Kimberly and Stacy. So it is weird because how many people, ends up missing or murdered in a 2-block radius? However, it's New York. It's very, very big. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of alleys. There's a lot going on there. So could be just coincidence, probably just coincidence, but it is worth noting. So the New Jersey killer came to be known as the Eastbound Strangler and has never been caught either. And there's still a $25,000 reward in that case.
Now, here's a quick physical description of Stacy. She's born in 1973, April 30th. She was 21 years old at the time. She's a Black African-American woman. She's about 5 feet tall, at the time 117 pounds. There's not a known alias that she had used. Does have a scar on her left eyebrow, and the last time that she was seen, she was wearing a green ski jacket, gray sweatpants, and white shoes. Now, if you see anything, please call, or if you know anything, please call the NYCPD Missing Person Squad. And we have the number, and we're going to link that in our show notes.
But I'm very curious to know how they cleared the person that she was with, because you always suspect the last person that was with somebody. You do. And if it was a really solid alibi or whatever, that's awesome. I hope that it was thorough and they are very confident in that, because you just have to wonder, and then somebody else had said she had just recently broken up with that boyfriend. She went to the movies with this guy. Maybe he was jealous and it was him. So, but again, apparently both of them were cleared. So I'm very, very curious to know what cleared them, but maybe something will come of that Reddit theory. I mean, people were looking at the maps and all that, and we will post a link to the Reddit post as well. Someone asked in the chat about that, so we will do that as well.
Oh, when y'all mentioned, this is going back to the case, when y'all mentioned like serial killers, like don't always stay like in the same place.
Yeah.
And sometimes cross state lines. The first person that came to my mind was Israel Keys.
I knew you were going to say that. When you started saying that, I was like, she's thinking of Israel Keys, I bet.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was, he went, across a few state lines.
Just a few times too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think more Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or cruises, international waters.
Yeah.
I'm still,
Yeah.
my stake is on there. But legit though, I mean, people are like, oh, it's not the same MO, or it's 2 streets down. It's this, it's got to be the exact same. We're talking human nature. They are going to go, they're opportunists. They are not going to go to the same street twice. Yes, they have their hunting ground, but I mean, they're just going to take what they can get. Sometimes.
And now you guys,
Like with the car thing, like the first one, they'd never found it. It's easy to drive a car as that deal originally got there.
Yeah.
And the second one, something could have happened that stopped them from doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I don't like, Kimberly was the one who was basically like tortured and burned. That's, it's weird. I don't know if that one is related to the Jane Doe that was in the suitcase, even though the suitcase was burned as well, because that is completely different. I mean, I guess it could have been, but
Well, the same
Kimberly's
hit.
cause of death was burning to death. The other victim was strangulation, and they just burned the body.
But the fire is going to destroy DNA evidence flat out, or
Yeah.
for the most part. I mean, it's not going to, you can't destroy everything all the time. You can leave some trace evidence.
Yeah.
Even if you dump them in the middle of the ocean.
They adapt, they change, find out what works. Yeah.
They
They
figure out
evolve.
what works.
Yep.
Yeah. Or they're like, hey, it's, last time a whole bunch of people saw me clean this car. I got lucky.
Yeah.
Let's just go ahead and run the car into the water. No one's going to look here.
So Stacy happened first. So it wouldn't have happened necessarily that way. But I see what you're saying, though, because Stacy happened first. So what I think potentially, if it was the same person, first of all, we don't know that. But if it was, he does whatever with Stacy's car, puts it in a junkyard, puts it in the river, whatever. Well, that was too much work. I can't do that again. I'm just going to clean it. No one's going to connect me to it anyway because I don't know her. You know what I'm saying? And just leaves it out there. Or like Colin said, something happened where the road was too busy and couldn't drive it off or whatever.
But they never did find Stacy's car.
No.
They don't have any idea where Stacy could be.
Nope. And there's not been any sightings. A lot of times in missing persons cases, even if they're not legit, somebody will think it's that person. Oh, I think I saw her, whatever. There's nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, and I hear from watching forensic files, there's a lot of like cars with and without bodies that are supposed to have been dumped in the Ohio River.
Mm-hmm.
That they say they just can't find them because the water, the currents are just too strong, and by the time they get someone down there, the car could be hundreds of miles away.
True. Yeah.
It's amazing during a drought season when all the lakes go down, all the stuff they do find.
Well, and they can't drain this particular area of water. However it flows and what it feeds into. And again, in that Reddit post, there's all sorts of stuff in there, but they can't drain it for that reason. So it would have to be divers or sonar or whatever. The other thing people said would be possible is at that time, Hondas and some other cars were big targets for people who were like, who would take parts, and they would dismantle cars, take their parts. So they could have stolen the car, had it taken apart, and then junked the rest as well. So,
What do they call it? Chop shop. They take it to a
Yeah.
chop shop, and they sell it out for parts. Because I mean, a Honda's going to last you until you wreck it.
Yeah.
Or used to be. I mean, anything that went wrong with my Honda Civic was what I did to it. One too many curb checks.
Yeah. That. Those curbs just jump right out.
Those
Okay,
awesome.
they don't-
That actually finishes up our story about Stacy. If you see anything, know anything, or want to give a tip, go ahead and click those show notes. Don't forget that we have Patreon, which actually we're doing right now. We're going to cut off the audio so we can hang out and chat with our Patreon friends. If you'd like to join Patreon, go to patreon.com/Corpus Delicti. But until then, you know what they said to Felicia.
Bye.
Bye.